Hey, Hotel Bar Sessions listeners. This is our first Afterthoughts episode of season 2, and your first chance to see the live heads of my new co-hosts. This is Dr. Rick Lee, and that is Dr. Charles Peterson. We've been having a lot of fun so far in this season 2. We're going to do Afterthoughts episodes every 3 episodes this season instead of 5. So this is our chance to just be able to articulate what it is that we wish we would have said, or maybe something came to us later after we listened to the episode back and we wanted to add it in before it all sort of peters off into the interweb sphere. So you guys, the 3 episodes that we're going to be talking about today are episode 1, which was on private cities, episode 2, which was on citizenship, and episode 3, which was on digital afterlives. So Rick, let's go to you first. What did you want to say?
So in thinking about and re-listening to the private cities episode, one thing I wished I had raised, and I had it in the back of my mind, but these things, the opportunity doesn't seem right, or you forget about them. At one point we were talking about how in some cities in the United States, there have, especially as a result of the housing crisis, there have been abandoned properties. The city of Chicago has been tearing those down, but in neighborhoods, and these are primarily African-American neighborhoods, to have that many abandoned properties is really destructive of the community, and it's also dangerous. And yet at the same time, and now I'm thinking of a community in Chicago called Inglewood, community organizations have gotten together, and sometimes with the help of the city, they've taken over those private lots and they start growing gardens. Mm-hmm. And that leads to another problem I didn't get a chance to mention, and that is in many cities in the US, there are what are known as food deserts. That is places where you have to travel more than 3 miles to get a grocery store. And so you have convenience stores, you have liquor stores, but to get especially fresh food, you can't get it in your neighborhood. And so these communities, so I'm thinking of the Inglewood Community Garden, they've been taking over abandoned properties and turning them into food production to help with also this food desert problem. So I wished I had talked about that.
Yeah, I will say that one of the things that I thought about after the Private Cities episode was that I don't think that we mentioned this whole thing about private fire departments, which actually I don't even really think I really knew about until the most recent spate of fires in California. It was also a subplot to a TV show that I've been watching, but I can't remember which one it was, where someone had a sort of private fire department put out their mansion fire. But yeah, that is something that's really troubling. I mean, because, we've seen the increasing privatization of, police, for example, in gated neighborhoods, but, private fire departments, that's bad.
Yeah. That's not something, if it goes awry, gets contained in your home.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I've just been reading The Parable of the Sower. I'm like, ooh, great novel, little too prophetic.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, the novel is set in 2025, so yes, a little too close to home. I was thinking about the Private City episode. I was thinking I wanted to talk more about the squatter movement, the ways in which citizens have been sort of reclaiming. And I remember this spending time in New York, and you would see sort of squatter movements were beginning to develop community gardens and taking advantage of deserted plots of land because of buildings had been sort of demolished and removed. And I wish we'd have spoken more about that in terms of the ways in which sort of citizens recognize this privatization and sort of begin to work outside of normal political systems in order to address the problems and their concerns.
That leads me to a general afterthought I had about all the episodes we've done so far. I feel like sometimes I engage the topics with a hypercritical lens, and this is why I invented the PH dub. And yet, so Charles here just points to squatting. I think I need to start focusing more on positive features and potentials for action and change. I feel like I'm a little bit too negative on a lot of the issues we've been talking about so far.
Raise your hand if you've noticed that about Rick.
If you're listening to this, please note no one raised their hand.
Hey, Charles, was there anything about the second episode on citizenship that you wanted to add in?
Oh, no, it was perfect. It was everything I wanted to be. No, I wish I could have sort of taken more time to talk about the various ways in which, certainly coming out of the African-American political and activist tradition, that citizenship had been redefined, how questions of activism around citizenship have been refined, and really to stress the point that the normalizing of the formal relationship and expectations of citizenship for African Americans, how that is not the only sort of current or tradition that we can pull from, that there have been many voices over the past 200 years who have chosen extra normal, extra sort of formulaic ways by which to define who they are and to understand and begin to build decent sort of lives of integrity and dignity. So that's the one thing that I regret we didn't talk about, this array of figures who had a different vision for what it meant to be related to sovereignty.
Yeah, I wish that we had talked a little bit about civic education. I think that, I was talking to one of my neighbors who has a daughter who, I'm terrible at judging children's ages. She was like this tall, this old. So I don't know. Like
she was yay high.
She was maybe middle school, I'm guessing. But I said, well, are you taking civics? And she was like, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, oh, maybe American government or something. She's like, no, I've never had a class like that. And I don't even know if it's a requirement anymore. I know it was a requirement when I was in high school. And I feel like I remember having American government or civics or something like that be a requirement through grade school and junior high. But it made me think, and I actually got into a kind of long conversation with my neighbor about sort of like what should be included in a civics class today. Anyway.
I distinctly remember taking a government and econ class. Wow. I think it was my junior year in high school. And I remember distinctly, Mr. Rendell was the teacher, and this had to be 1987. And I think someone referred to the Soviet Union as Russia. And he said, it's not Russia, it's the Soviet Union. Things changed in so it was, but there was definitely a clear attempt to teach children, this is how your government runs, this is the function, these are the figures, this is how it all works, so you can understand it and be a better citizen because you're knowledgeable.
In eighth grade,
I was just going to say, can you imagine how hard it would be to teach government, like how the government actually functions now? You're like, kids, this is a filibuster.
I actually feel bad for geography for kids after like 1991 who have to learn like the alphabet soup of European countries now.
Yeah.
Like all these more republics out of the old Soviet Union.
So when I was in eighth grade, we had to pass a constitution test, and leading up to that then was all of this civics. But that leads me to another point. I felt like, Lee, you kept pushing us to de-link citizenship from the nation state. Mm-hmm. And in thinking more about your pushing this, I thought there was some really rich potential that I think we could have developed a little bit more in that direction.
All right.
Well, let's talk about our digital afterlives then. I mean, that was a perfect episode. No, I do want to say one of the things that I regret, but I kind of made up for in the episode notes, was that I didn't actually talk about more really specific examples of how people are being kept alive. Their digital archives of information are being reanimated after their deaths. So I do want to encourage everybody to go check out those those notes for that episode, because there are some really cool stories about how this is actually happening right now. But I will say that since then, I tweeted at Charles about this just a few days ago, that there is the whole kind of hologram concert is about to be happening again. Who was it, Charles?
Tupac.
No, Whitney Houston.
Yeah, Whitney
Oh.
Houston. They're about to have a hologram Whitney Houston concert, and Charles, of course, was like, "Not in my neighborhood, they're not." But I think that
How do you cannibalize a digital body?
Yeah, well, I think that we're going to see more and more of this. I mean, Zuckerberg announced last week that he is intending for Facebook to develop not as an internet company or a social media company, but as what he calls, well, not what he calls, but what is called a metaverse company. So a metaverse is like, these things that kind of span the physical and the virtual worlds. They have their own independent economies. They have, interoperability. And so, it seems to me that, holograms are just the beginning. So, but anyway, what about you guys?
I mean, I did talk about it, but I wished I had been slightly more clear and even more insistent than I was on the fact that these electrons are physical things and that they are the property of someone who's not usually us. Mm-hmm. And I think that thinking about these as physical things also helps us to understand, like, servers are doing a tremendous job heating our atmosphere, the amount of energy it takes to cool them. And so, like, I think we forget about, like, the real world meat and molecules and fossil fuels and so on that go to making up our digital identities, but also that they live somewhere and someone owns that server and they could take it and they could take my Facebook away from me.
What about you, Charles?
I'm still adapting to being referred to as meat space. I think you guys all of your points I agree with. These are things I wish we had sort of engaged in, explored at a deeper level. But that was a barn burner of an episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we got off to a pretty good start here in season 2. I'm like really pleased so far. And we've got some really great episodes coming up. And after our episode 6, you'll see us back here again on YouTube for our second Afterthoughts. But in the meantime, make sure that you visit our website at www.hotelbarpodcast.com. And you can follow us on Twitter at Hotel Bar Podcast. And until then, I will see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.